Google Hangout, right?
He's got a thing on there, like a layout, but it's the one we've been using since the first week.
He does.
But yeah, no, my brother's very good.
See. Yes, and I will definitely hit him up again. Okay, let me check this out.
Brother's very good.
Oh, perfect. All right. Gonna shoot the link to Twitter, and we can get started. Anything you want to touch on tonight, especially? I know we're just gonna do a little preview, review. I know when we set up week 9.
Yeah, we could
I didn't
talk a little
realize
bit of
EC
LEC.
is
I
gonna
brought up
fall
all
this
the
far
info
behind.
about
But
like the
if you still
important
got thoughts
LCS
about
stuff, so we
futures
can
and whatnot, we definitely can talk about.
we can kind of
those.
go into that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and we can definitely like YouTube.
Yeah, there was
revisit some of
definitely
the
some
playoff
upsets that like kind of threw that off.
implications.
I'll load up the
Things didn't work
LCS
out
slates
as
on my
well as you
phone
thought it
too,
would
so that I
last
can
week. Is
look
that
at
what you understood it
like
as?
prices and stuff like that while we're talking.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Got it. Got it. And then sports plug and
I love how 100 Thieves has just been getting dumpstered this whole game, but
DFS,
they're still up 4,000 gold.
LCS. All right. Right.
The other matchup tonight is the
Academy
funny
makes no
one
sense to me,
because
and
it's
that's
two
why
teams
I
that made
just rely
playoffs but have
on
both
you
been
and
really
Cal to
bad for like the
kind
last
of
3
point
or
me
4 weeks.
in a
Like one of
direction.
them is like 1-7 in their last 8 games, and the other one's like 2-6. But they both made playoffs, so it's like who is the least suck at the end of the season?
That is definitely what we always come to face to terms with these LOL esports. But at least that means people have no idea where to go.
Okay, I
It's like, do I
retweeted you
go with
there
the
as
team
well.
that's good, or do I go with recent form?
Damage. Days are numbered. One more auto attack and a solo kill. Dublin wants that crown again.
And we are live, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of LeagueDFS. My name is Chris Chung, and tonight I have special guest, the esports plug, John George. What is up?
How we doing, everybody? As per usual.
Yes, and tonight we're gonna do it a little different because scheduling threw me off, so I'm gonna have this stream so you get the information ready, get it fired up. We have the LEC going on tomorrow, and of course we're gonna cover the whole weekend slate. But before we jump into that, how has the season been treating you, John?
Man, it's been pretty darn good. It's been some things going better than others. Like I was having a big talk in my group chat about how I think the action on 3-mans on DraftKings is kind of dead because too many of the high stakes players play the same lineup every night, and it just ends up with like a non-profitable situation where me and one guy have the same lineup, and then there's a third guy that has a different lineup, and so if we win, we get a little bit of profit, and if we lose all of our money. Becomes kind of non-profitable. But yeah, some regions better than others. Some game types like GPPs have been unbelievable this season for me. The Eastern regions, actually, this split have been really profitable for me. It's been actually my favorite region, the LEC, that hasn't been as profitable for me this season. But what are you gonna do?
All right, and of course the happens to me that I feel like it's the opposite for me. I have a better read on the Western regions, which it's helpful. Not to say that I profit big, but it's been more profitable than last year. So this is good gauge for me to see my own improvement as a DFS player. But definitely, I'm suffering more so in the summer split when it comes to the Eastern regions. But good that I can always plug my ear in and have you there to guide me, and for me not to mess up by just trying to think I'm outsmarting people because I'm not. In any case, tonight we're going to talk a little bit, review what happened last weekend, Going to do a little preview for what's happening. We're going to also have our eyes on Worlds because, ladies and gentlemen, it's the final week of LCS. I don't think any other regions is going to playoffs yet. Maybe LCK.
Yeah, we're not too far away in the LCK.
Yeah.
A little bit of time left in the LPL, and then Europe is like very far behind everyone right now.
And that might have some implication. I don't know how that works when it comes to preparation and eyes on World, but Worlds is around the corner. Be excited for it. I know a lot of you are probably more excited that football season is around the corner. I'm excited for that too, but guys, this is a bankroll builder. You can spend it all on NASCAR, you can spend it all on NFL, but this, LOL, following John George, you can be profitable and maybe even exceed your bankroll. So let's help these folks out. If nothing else, sports betting is a great thing. As John, you have always preached that esports has been one of the most fun sports betting for you.
I know it can be kind of scary for people. Like even for some people, like even just doing DraftKings was kind of like a weird like step out of their comfort zone. And so when I mentioned sports betting to a lot of people, it feels even like a little bit too much out of their comfort zone. They don't really want to mess with it. And I understand that, but I just had a conversation with a guy on Twitter the other day who was looking to get into trying to make money somehow through some form of gambling on League. And I said, I think the smartest thing you can do if you're starting out is specialize in one region and do betting and DFS for that region. So like start with just the LCS, but make sure to get involved with both betting and DFS because betting is much more consistent than DFS is. You don't have the chance to like make 10 times your money very often in betting, but it's much more consistent and it builds up slowly. So I do think people should check that out if they're not already doing it.
Absolutely, and I'd say the same advice I would give for DFS. If you're too overwhelmed by all the different names, all the different regions, and how there's best of 3 versus best of 1, start with one region and focus on that, and that's helped me too.
And if you hate, a lot of people like hate the substitutions that happen in best of 3s. Like just avoid China and Korea. If you don't want to put in the time, if you're busy and you've got a job or kids or whatever, you don't want to put in the time to search Twitter and Weibo and try to figure out who's going to sub, then just focus on the regions where that's not really a problem very often. You can play just LCS and LEC and wait 4 days and then get back into the game again.
Absolutely. And for what it's worth, the best prizes typically lands on the LCS slates.
Yep, true.
And with our knowledge of this game, of course, for me, it's been more fun, more be able to give out some cash advice because of the wider pool in LEC and LCS. It's much tougher when it comes to the Korean leagues and the China leagues, but equally, once you mastered this, you can start thinking and branching out, and you can play basically every night. So as far as I remember, every single night, there's an LOL slate.
Yeah, you can play League DFS any day of the week, and it's just I do, like I say, I recommend specializing to begin with, but once you get your region down where you really think you understand the teams and the rosters, it shouldn't really be taking you more than like maybe 20 minutes to put your lineups together for that region. So then you can start expanding and say, I'm going to spend my 20 minutes on North America, and then I'm going to spend an hour doing some like research and stuff on China or whatever. I'm going to start trying to get into China. So
Absolutely. And just so we jump into this, let's review a little bit because we are coming to the end of the LCS. So of course, LEC is going to lag behind a little bit, but nonetheless, what has been this split for you as far as reading the LEC LCS?
Well, I think I've read them pretty well. I haven't made very much money in the LEC specifically because I keep betting against G2. And I think G2 is the best team in the world, don't get me wrong. But I think they're a highly variant team that, especially during the regular season, likes to take games off sometimes. And so usually in DFS, if I think I can get G2's opponent at like 5% owned, I'm usually pretty happy to do that because, like I said, I think G2's pretty variant. Their opponents are not owned, and if they do lose, they're going to give up a lot of kills. So it's been really common for me this season to play G2's opponents in the GPPs, and they have not been giving up. They've been trolling some games, but they have not been losing those games. and
right.
So it hasn't paid off to be on the opposite side of G2. But I think they're still the favorites going into Worlds. So
absolutely, and let's jump into that G2 idea first. I know in Spring Split they definitely trolled away some of the games and was majorly profitable for those who bet against them. We thought,
Yeah, because you have to remember,
Mhm.
I'll just say for the people to like understand why I would ever do that, because I do, like I said, I just think G2 is the best team in the world. So
Absolutely.
like, why am I playing against them every day? You have to remember that when you're talking GPPs, if you enter every GPP on DraftKings, it costs $216. And if you win every GPP on DraftKings, it pays like $2,000. So you essentially only need to win them. If you win them one in every 10 times, it's profitable. And so if you think that G2 is going to lose one in every 10 games, and that when they lose, their opponents will always be like the highest scoring team on the slate, then rostering G2 every single day or rostering G2's opponents every single day makes sense. So that's essentially what I've been doing this whole season, except G2's only lost one game, and it was the one game where I didn't roster them because they were playing against Fnatic.
uh,
I didn't roster their
they,
opponents, so
ah, that one that got away, but you have another chance because they haven't faced Fnatic yet for the second time. Well, I don't know if that's going to be a very profitable because I think people will be thinking, they beat them
well,
last
that's
time.
the whole thing. Fnatic's the one team I don't want to roster against them because I think other people will actually take Fnatic against G2.
Mhm.
Like when Rogue is playing against G2, I expect literally nobody else to have Rogue in any of the bigger tournaments.
Mhm.
So taking Rogue if they win is an automatic win in all those tournaments. Whereas when they play Fnatic, I expect a couple people to be on Fnatic, so it's not worth it for me. I'll probably end up just playing G2.
Yeah, absolutely, and you'll get a lower ownership in general than what you typically find for G2 in that particular game.
Yep.
So once that game comes up, I forgot if it's this week or next week, but eventually we'll definitely have that discussion. Be remember this. This is good advice. This is sharp advice, guys. This is how you play the game to be profitable. You can't just follow the herd. It's easy to figure out who's going to be chalk or who's going to be popular if you pay attention, but we can't expect. It is less likely that a team goes undefeated or just having fewer than 2 or 3 losses. So that time when it does come and nobody expects it, that's when you profit the most.
And it's very hard, I'll say. I tried this when I first started playing LeagueDFS, like I don't know how many years ago now. It was many years ago.
Wow.
It is really hard to make money just betting the teams you think are going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Even if every game was a 2-game slate, like every day was a 2-match slate, if you never leverage ownership or anything and you just say, I think A is going to win, I think B is going to win, I'm going to play A and B, it's really hard to make money that way because everybody thinks A and B are going to win. And so you can have the right teams and still end up not making the money because you don't have the right combination. You took Doinby instead of Scout.
Oh,
And so
my
your
gosh,
lineup,
yes.
now you're down 20 points and there's 7 people that have the lineup that you didn't pick. And so you don't even make the money even though you're on the right teams. It is super important to leverage ownership and look for a team where you're like, well, I don't think OMG is going to win, but I think they win like 40% of the time, and I don't think anybody is going to own them. And so I'll just play OMG even though I don't think they're going to win, because when they do win, I'm going to make 10 times my money back.
You're
Like, that's
way ahead of the
super
field.
important.
Yeah,
Super important.
You're way ahead of the field. I think reading the field has become that much more important. I know in the past it's been important. You try to figure it out. You're trying to figure out your heads up. You're trying to figure out your 3-man, 5-man, even your large field GPPs. But even more so now with the changes to the format, 2 less flex spot. I don't think we had the chance to talk about this in the past, but let's touch on that a little bit. This year, coming into this year, you and I, everyone else involved, we were trying to figure out how does this format work with the captain spot, with losing those 2 flex spots. What are we thinking? Trying to just tease things out. I know it has sort of over time we found a consistent or a process knowing how to utilize those each position and looking for values. And during the summer split, now DK decided to let's screw up the salary. They can't figure it out. We can't predict how the salary works anymore, because back then Wooby, you and I, we just figured out, oh, this team is salary this much, so most of their players are going to be at that tier of salary. Now I think what the algorithm is looking for is ownership, and that's how it's
It's starting to get better at looking at individual players' scores too.
Yeah.
You'll notice they've really started to get better about like if one support tends to get a lot of assists and some of the other supports don't get as many assists, the prices reflect that. Instead of just being, this is Cloud9's support, Cloud9 is the most expensive team, so this guy is the most expensive support. Instead of just doing it that way, they started actually looking a little bit at what the players are scoring and saying, like, yeah, this guy's Cloud9 support, but he doesn't have a very high, like, average game score, so we're going to put him below, TSM support, who's the second biggest favorite on the slate. So in that way, I think it's probably good, but it has made roster construction a lot harder.
Absolutely. You'll see every single week Double Lift will be the most expensive or top of the those, regardless of the matchup. And then you see Jensen maybe like the third or the fourth most expensive mid.
But for good reason, because if you look at Double Lift scores, he like never scores less than 35. Like every game is like 35, 37, 40, and nobody in the LCS scores anything. So getting 35 a game is absurd in the LCS. So with good reason.
Yeah, he's definitely a cash like plug-in. I would play him one-off if I would, but typically I just go stack him with Core JJ because that's how you play that spot, the ADC stack with your support. So with that in mind, I do think I will give DK credit. I know I give them a lot of shit for, their crazy being lazy about pools, locking in contests that doesn't start for another 2 hours just to find out that the substitution has happened. But they're trying. I'll give them that.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a lot of support for the LoL community. I mean, they might have. I literally wouldn't be surprised if there was just one guy at DraftKings and his job was like to keep track of this stuff. And like, if some of these mistakes are just because it's his day off, like that wouldn't surprise me at all. But, if we want it to be more popular, then we got to have that representation. We've lost tournaments over the last couple of years, like the $300 tournament for LCS disappeared because it wasn't getting enough players. The $100 tournaments have gotten smaller than they used to be because they weren't getting enough players. So if we want to see, a lot of eyes on our product, then we got to support it. So
absolutely. Even the $8 has a lower top price, but
yep.
Yeah. So we feel that, but hopefully we'll generate a bit more interest. The esports world itself has been making more noise in the mainstream world, so we're hoping. We're going to continue pushing on. You and I will be here as long as they offer this product, the League of Legends esports product. And so we will now help you guys figure out this weekend. So before we get there, I've neglected to mention this is a feature of the Game House. This episode is hosted on their YouTube site, but it's also on my Twitch site as well. Also like to give a shout out to Toby George, who created this wonderful overlay. And for those who don't know, he is John's.
He's my brother, and he's very good at his job. If anybody needs any graphic design stuff done, I would recommend checking him out on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. The talent just runs in the family in different arenas.
Very different arenas.
Yes, I would hit him up. He's very detailed. He will make sure to get your preferences, ask you how you want it done, and it's just great if you're starting to think about opening your own podcast. So with that said, let's head into the weekend. Let's review last weekend. LEC, let's start off with the European region, as I typically do. We have a couple of games that went the way that we expected, but I think we made a very good call on the gold card pot on some of these games. Which ones were yours that you knew that people were going to be lower owned, that people are not going to even give it a chance? And let's start with day one.
Yeah, there was definitely some good calls on our gold card podcast this week. I did like XL over Rogue, which was a nice little payoff there. G2 beating Origin, I thought was pretty much a guarantee. Splice, I talked about Splice versus Vitality on the Gold Card podcast, how I think Splice just has a kind of style that kind of abuses Vitality. I didn't expect Misfits to win, but I do think we recommended betting Misfits. I don't remember for sure, but I think we recommended betting Misfits because a young, hungry lineup like that are always real wild cards, always have a chance to win. So I think we were pretty good as far as day one went. SK and Schalke, I don't think there was really too many questions for people about who was going to win that. I thought Schalke was going to win fairly easily, and they did. So
yeah, and that definitely the Misfit Fnatic game was really that turned the whole world upside down for me because I didn't think it would happen. Fnatic was running their main lineup. I mean, last week we could have understood that Fnatic was running with Magic Felix and Nemesis. But this was the Fnatic full lineup. And they just got destroyed. There was, from beginning to end, Misfits was ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't look too hard into that. Like, Fnatic's definitely at their point in the split where they're going to start just testing some things out. And it's not like they played like some troll comp. I mean,
No,
they did put Broxa back on Karthus again, which I don't necessarily think is like a very Broxa champion. But, you know, they're definitely experimenting with some stuff, trying to figure out what's going to work in playoffs. They're not worried about taking a regular season loss to Misfits.
The only notable thing to note is that Hilly has been losing with Pyke, who is supposed to be an S tier champion. Not sure what happened, but they too kind of gave us a glimpse of maybe Misfit did overperform. So it will give us some pause before we just all jump into this great team. And it's a great team. We've predicted it from the beginning. Leader over Febevin.
Yep, I was saying that at the beginning of last split that they needed to get rid of Febevin. And even like Dan over Soaz like is a big deal. I think Kirei's been fantastic. Like honestly, the biggest thing I would change back is I wouldn't have reverted their bot lane to begin with. Like I don't think Neon and Hiva are better than Hansama and Gorilla. I do think maybe you get rid of Gorilla because it seems like his style wasn't really working with the team.
Correct.
But Hansama is a superstar. Like Hansama should be in there, and if he's not, then like I said a couple weeks ago on Twitter, like a lot of teams should be on the phone to Hansama right now.
I think they should be just trying to get him onto a team right now, especially with Misfit moving in this direction. Which team do you think he'll stay in the LEC, or maybe he'll find his way to the LCS?
I mean, you would think he'd prefer to stay where he is. I mean, nobody really wants to uproot themselves for no reason. But I could see a lot of NA teams that I would pick him up for, like almost every team in the league. Like I think FlyQuest would be perfect. I mean, I know I'm a FlyQuest homer, but I think Wild Turtle's like kind of reign is coming to an end a little bit, and Hansama's a really great aggressive AD carry. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of teams in the LCS that could look at picking him up.
And just to remind me, if FlyQuest does retain Wadid, you have Hansama and Wadid. They get familiarity with one another.
Yep.
So that's something to look out for in the off season, guys. We will pay attention to those news for you, even if you don't. Now the day 2 gave us a little bit of showing of where Splice beat Schalke. I want to touch a little bit on Splice's pricing. They have not been pricing Splice at the top, but yet every single week we see Splice doing very well.
I think Splice is a great team to play in DFS because not only are they very good and, like you said, not priced as high as like a Fnatic or a G2, but Splice's style also tends to lend itself to like longer games. And teams that play longer games have a couple really big advantages in DFS. Number one, the kills that come at the beginning of a game are less valuable than the kills that come at the end of the game. Kills that come at the end of the game tend to have 4 assists on them. Whereas at the beginning of the game, it's like the jungler ganks top and the jungle get a killer assist. At the end of the game, if they get a kill, it's likely that everybody on the team gets an assist. So teams that tend to go towards late game team fighting have a lot of value that way. But also there's just the basics of like farm. Like 50 farm is worth a point. If the game goes 45 minutes, you're looking at 80 carries getting like 350, 400 farm. That's like 7 or 8 points. That's a lot of points coming out of farm. Whereas early games, you could have the game end with an 80 carry getting maybe 200 or 250 farm. So getting an extra 3 or 4 points just from farm, that's really valuable stuff.
Yeah, and that's where you find your edge. I know I typically don't pay attention to farming because in the past they've been negligible, but you do pay attention when it comes to a specific team that has the style of a Splice. Maybe more so
and
the
it can
LCK
matter.
team. And it can matter, definitely.
I showed you a screenshot the other day. Prime saw a screenshot the other day. The difference between me winning no money and $3,000 the other day was 3 minions. I was 3 minions behind a chalk lineup that every single tournament had like 5 copies of, and so I didn't make the money in anything. But if my team had killed 4 more minions, I would have won everything. So
Right.
like the farm matters.
The
for
farm
sure.
matters. This is talking about like yardage in football, or
Yep.
the difference between what's it in basketball? I can't even tell what stats it is, but football, every yard matters, and every yard is like a minion. It doesn't matter when it's like 1 or 2, but it builds up.
Yep. Over the course of a game, that 1 or 2 turns into 100, and then you get a 100-yard bonus, and
Yep.
yeah.
Oh yeah, and that is the difference between maybe even like you said, you have a scenario of cash and no cash, but it could also be the scenario between first place and fifth place in like a GPP. Let's see. Now, looking into what we learned from last week, which are the teams? I have some questions. I know we were higher on SK in the beginning of the season, and it seems like they had a good start, but now they're on a losing streak. What is going on with the team?
I'm going to make some completely unfounded statements about SK here because it just makes too much sense to me, given my experience that I've had with various kinds of sports. So this was a team that came in spring, very undervalued and undertouted. They overperformed what everyone expected of them. And they have some players, specifically in Self-Made and Crown Shot, two guys who are very known to be like kind of arrogant public figures. Not in a really bad way, but they're kind of double lift-esque. Like, guys that are willing to talk a little bit of trash if their team's doing well. And then in the offseason, they had that little drama where they got rid of Werlub. They said they put a lot of the blame for the season on Werlub, and they went and picked up a new top laner. I can almost guarantee you from how this is going that they got in the beginning of this season, lost some games, and I bet the mental on that team is awful right now. I bet that they're frustrated and mad. They're definitely underperforming what I expected of them this season, but I'm treating them like the worst team in the league when I'm looking at betting and DFSing against them because I just think there's definitely something wrong with the mentality in that team right now, and I don't see that getting better before the end of this split.
Which is quite unfortunate because this is a team that had a lot of potential. They were young. They come in with the EU Masters. A lot of expectation. You and I probably don't understand the benching of Werlip. Maybe there was some credence behind it, but
yeah, I don't really know what exactly happened. I just know that it sounded like, from what I heard from both sides, that they were putting a lot of the blame for their losses on Werlub. And I don't necessarily think that was fair, but either way, even if it was fair, it still is going to create a rift in your team if you guys are having an argument about whether or not someone's good enough to be on the team, et cetera, et cetera. So,
and that we have to look to next year for them because this split, it's pretty much over for them.
Yeah, it's over. It's over for SK. They're done for this split.
And the other team that's also backsliding, fair or not, is Origin. Noted last week they had the two toughest matchup that they'll ever face for the rest of the split. But even in their performance, there wasn't much that gives me a sense that this team can call themselves a top playoff team. They might even be that last if they make playoff for me.
This is something I predicted at the beginning of spring. And this is one of my biggest successes of all year as far as predictions and stuff go. It was Origin because what I said about them in spring was I don't think this team has as much talent as people are saying it has. I think Nuke Duck is very good. I think Cold is fine. I think Alfari is fine. I think Patrick is one of those rookie type guys where he could get really good or he might just be mediocre for the rest of his career. And Mithy's awful. So I said at the beginning, the reason this team is winning is because their coaching staff and general management is brilliant. They have some of the best coaches and general management staff in the entire league. The reason that they were so successful was because they were out drafting people, out strategizing people. It wasn't because they had a bunch of super skilled players. But once a team like that has film and people can watch them and look at what they're doing, they start to fall off because they don't have the talent to compete in the lanes. And that's what's happening in summer for them. I will say people shouldn't overreact too much. Kind of like you just said, they have the easiest remaining schedule of any team in the league. Every team has 3 teams that they don't have to play again because they've already played them twice. Mm-hmm. And for Origin, that is G2, Fnatic, and Vitality. So it's pretty much the toughest 3 teams you could have. Not quite, but pretty close to the toughest 3 teams you could have that they don't have to play again. So they should rise from here, I think. But I totally agree with you that they're not at all a legitimate playoff contender.
Yeah. and this team has good structure. I think it's talent that's missing, which is rare. For most teams, it's typically the talent that you see that's already on stage that doesn't have a
They're the
good...
reverse Vitality from
Yes.
spring. Like Vitality had all the talent and just no strategy, and Origin has all the strategy and like they have a good team. Like they have good strategy. They have passable players except for Mithy, and they also seem like fairly selfless guys. Like I don't see any of them
Mhm.
like going in a rage fit on Twitter about like all these guys are, I can't carry these guys. That's not who they've got on this team. They do have selfless guys who will follow the plan, but that's what makes you one of those teams that comes fourth every split. And
Absolutely.
so like if they're all right being one of those teams, I think that's what they've got right now.
Well, I sure hope that they would do some changes in the upcoming season because it's fun to have an Origin team. Based on their reputation, at the least, people love this team in Europe.
Yeah, they'll make some changes. They have a very smart general management and coaching team. They'll make some good changes.
Wonderful. So let's then preview this upcoming week. We have a couple of games. Let me pull them up. It's already showing here. We have, starting off, Splice against Excel. Then we have Rogue against SK, G2 against Vitality, Misfit against Origin, Fnatic against Schalke. Without giving too much of your strategy, which of these games, are you circling? Are you thinking about that, the field might be undervaluing or overlooking?
Well, it's really hard. I mean, nobody's undervaluing this game, but it's really hard not to play G2 because not only is it G2 who like literally every game is scoring an absurd amount of points, but they're playing against Vitality, who's also one of the bloodier teams in the league, and is the kind of team that when they're losing does not like turtle in their base and give up an inhibitor. Like they just fight. Yeah. So, man, it is tough not to play G2. On the other side of the coin, what have I been doing all season, as previously mentioned in this podcast? Playing opponents of G2, and I honestly think this is a great spot to play Vitality. We're like G2's locked into playoffs. They're basically locked into coming first.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any reason to show anything off. Vitality desperately needs to win, and we're playing two teams here who are very high variance. So this is a great Vitality spot for me. I'll almost certainly be playing Vitality.
I can almost guarantee you that that the ownership would be floating around 10-15 at the most %.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of people playing Vitality, and I think they're a really good choice for this weekend.
And that'll be a fun game because we always like the bloody games, or at least high-paced game. I always chase after those for DFS purposes because teams like Vitality, they don't give up. No matter if they're 5,000 or 500 gold behind, they don't give up.
Yep.
Shizuka doesn't give up. With that in mind, I also want to touch on the interesting game based on the salary, and I'm not going to show it here, guys, because of YouTube's policy and whatnot. I won't be able to show you the DraftKings page, but looking at it, you can look at it yourself. We have G2 naturally being priced the most expensive. Now, Splice finally gets some respect. They're priced right under G2. Does this game give you any, feels for, let's play some Splice to differentiate yourself if we're not playing G2?
This is an interesting one. I think it's a little hard to play Splice depending on the prices of their actual players. Like with Humanoid being $200 less than Caps, it's really, really hard to play Humanoid.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. But the upside to this game is you do have two teams who tend to play a slower pace and go into longer games, which can, like I was talking about earlier, lead to some pretty high scores.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those games that I think is just kind of ruined by G2 existing. However, if you agree with what I was talking about earlier with Vitality being a possible play this weekend, Splice makes a great team to pair with them. I think they're very safe in this matchup. Like they shouldn't be losing to XL. This game should go 35 plus minutes with big team fights. So I think Splice is definitely an option to pair with Vitality, but I think I'm probably avoiding this game in general. Mm-hmm. Like if Vitality's not in my lineup, I don't think anybody from this game's in my lineup.
Correct. I think there's also another angle that I typically am afraid of with two slower type of team is that they avoid fighting one another. You'll see a lot of the LCK. That's just one of the minor angle that makes me go away from this game, but there is definitely a potential for a high scoring game, specifically like you mentioned 35-minute is the spike, and they look great in team fights, and they will team fight when it comes time. Now, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I think Misfit will be more popular just because of what we saw last week. And
There's some very weird pricing involving the Misfits. I think their pricing is kind of reasonable. I think they should be closer to Origin. I think Origin should be the favorite, but they should be closer. The big question mark for me in pricing is Rogue being an underdog to SK. And I think that ruins a lot of the value of Misfits. Because Origin is the slowest team in the league. So generally you don't want to be involved in Origin games if you can help it. Originally, I would have said, if I just looked at like the top 4 games on this slate, I would have said like I'm going to have some Vitality lineups and I'm going to have some Misfits lineups because those are the 2 underdogs I think can win. The problem is I think Misfits value gets choked out by the fact that Rogue is also an underdog, and Rogue actually probably should be the favorite, whereas Misfits is a legitimate underdog. Like, they have a chance to win, but they're an underdog. Whereas I think Rogue is actually a favorite, but priced as an underdog. So I think Rogue and Vitality should take the ownership away from Misfits, and I'm not really sure there's a reason to try to play them.
And yeah, I think that you make a great point that Rogue will probably be the reason why people don't have to go down to Misfits.
A huge percentage of people this weekend are going to be on Rogue and either Fnatic, G2, or Splice with like a jungle captain or something. That's going to be a huge percentage of the lineups, I think.
And this is how we walk ourselves through this process, looking at the salary and figuring out where the ownership will fall. And this is a good exercise for y'all to kind of see how we go through it. Interesting enough, we did talk about the DK pricing, and for the team, SK is priced as favorite, but for the rest, every single position, Rogue is priced above SK players, but only by 200 short, or $200 difference.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't make that big of a difference, but I can almost guarantee you that SK will be less owned than Rogue.
Yeah, I'm still pretty confident as long as you can get a jungle, like Rogue's jungler at captain is still only $8,400. So you could, I almost guarantee you can make a lineup with Rogue and any favorite and have it fit. And so I expect Rogue to be very, very popular.
There are different ways to go, and this is why I enjoy talking about the LEC LCS game. There's more than one ways to build a lineup and win the tournament. Okay, so with that, we're leaving Europe behind. We only have the salary for day 1. They still have some ways to go. They're heading into week 7, then they have 8 and 9 to go before we can know for sure which teams are making playoff. Let's turn to LCS now, North America. Some say it's the greatest region of all. Some will just tell you that they are irrelevant when it comes to international games. But for our purposes, there is a contest going on this Sunday, which y'all should be aware of. It's one of the final send-off, and of course all the satellites, if you have been collecting tickets throughout this week or even the last 2 weeks, naturally they pick day 2 of LCS where everything is unpredictable. But we have John here to help us untangle all of the playoff implications, which teams have something to play for, which teams will probably look to troll Fiesta their way to the last day. But before we get to day 2, let's start with day 1. We'll have to review what happened last week. Last week, we were coming in with a picture of what the playoff would look like. Some of these matchups, they look very clear to us who would win. Maybe some of others are closer than others. But after the whole weekend, it threw us for a loop because the playoff picture is now shifting again. What have you found, John?
So there's going to be a lot of teams that care about this weekend, for sure. There's only a few teams that don't, that you can kind of look. Keep in mind that on the last weekend, teams that are already locked for playoffs or teams that are already locked out of playoffs are great teams to target against. The teams that are locked into playoffs are going to try not to show strategies and will often play like very weird, funny, trolly stuff. And the teams that are locked out of playoffs are just trying to put on a show for the fans for the most part. I mean, they want to get a win, but they're trying to put on a show for the fans. And so Team Liquid, CLG, and Cloud9 are all locked into playoffs, and FlyQuest and Echo Fox are already locked out of playoffs. So half the teams in the league don't care about the games this weekend. And specifically, what I would say is if you're looking for a bloody game, I like any game between two teams that are either locked or eliminated already. If you're looking for an underdog that can win, I love any matchup of a team that cares about this game against a team that doesn't care about this game, where the one that cares is an underdog. Um,
Yep.
Kind of like the G2 situation, though.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the team that's trolling is just so much better than the team that's not trolling that it doesn't matter. Like, I still don't think I'll be playing against Team Liquid this weekend, even though they don't care, because they're so much better that even if they bust out like some weird Pantheon strategy, I still would just expect them to win.
Right.
So,
and for TL, unfortunately, they don't win in the same style as G2. They
No,
will
not
play
quite.
very just sound League of Legends. Maybe have some fun with Champion Select, but typically it does make sense with the comp and whatnot, and you don't expect them to just turn up the pace, which has served them well throughout, and I don't think they're going to mess with that formula. Last week's game, I think the first one that really hurt my bankroll was the C9 against FlyQuest. What happened there, John?
well, I mean, FlyQuest is still trying to get things together to see if they're going to be running this same lineup next split, if this is a team that can go somewhere or if it's a team that can't. If you just look at these compositions from that game, it just feels like a win for Cloud9 right at the or a win for FlyQuest right at the beginning of the game. Like Kaisa Nautilus, very good bottom lane, and up against Ezreal Yumi, which is not going to have a lot of like kill threat in lane. You have Aatrox against Kled, which Kled's been reported a lot as being pretty OP, like in solo queue, but hasn't really performed very much in pro play.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Aatrox has been dominant in pro play, and it's on arguably FlyQuest's best player, I would say, in Viper.
I agree.
So that feels like a big win. And then Niski playing the Twisted Fate. Like, Twisted Fate is not a Niski champion either, I don't think. So I was a little surprised to see Pobelter pick up the Yasuo, but it kind of felt like a win in champion select for FlyQuest as far as I was concerned. And a perfect example of what I was talking about teams that are locked into playoffs, trying stuff out and not being too worried about winning. That was Cloud9 in this game.
Of course, Cloud9 trying things out a little earlier than I expected them to, because they are only third place so far, behind CLG, which, you know, coming into this split, I did not really expect that.
I don't think anybody did.
I can go back on records. I had CLG. Okay, I didn't have CLG that last, but I had them under Fly. I had them below Golden Guardians. I had them below 100 Thieves.
Yep.
And now they're number 2. And then the other team that is, these are two teams that are sort of in the same tier now, but headed in a different directions coming into this week, was Golden Guardians against 100 Thieves. Golden Guardians made some weird changes. I think we talked about this in the Gold Card pod last week or the week before that, how they swap out their bot lane and seemingly trying to throw their season away. And then we have 100 Thieves that's surging. Very reminiscent of last year's C9, where they were bottom out. They had bringing in academy players, making swaps, thinking, you know, they're probably out of it or whatnot, and now they're back in the race for the playoffs. What do you think about these two teams right now?
Well, this is where I lost my money on that Saturday. Was I definitely thought 100 Thieves was going to beat Golden Guardians in that matchup. I thought the matchup stylistically worked out really well for 100 Thieves. I kind of had a different idea of what the playoff picture was going to look like, and part of that was that I highly expected 100 Thieves to win that game. So now the playoff picture has become much more muddled for both of those teams. Golden Guardians at 8-8. They're like a linchpin team for this upcoming week because they have two matchups, one of which against Cloud9, where I think they should lose.
Mhm.
The other one against Clutch Gaming is a real linchpin matchup to see who's going to make the playoffs. But we're going to have some 8 and 10 teams making the playoffs most likely, so we'll just have to see how that plays out. But
Seems typical of NA to have like a 500 team or below 500 team make playoffs.
very typical.
But that is an exciting game, if not for DFS purposes. I'm talking about the Clutch and 100 Thieves. But it's for our friends there at the 100 Talk Pod and League Leaders. They will be facing off one another and has major playoff implication.
The Red Rivalry, as they're calling it.
Yes, the Red Rivalry, which will no longer exist next year because...
Yeah, make sure to pick up a jersey, guys. Get yourself a jersey for the future discontinued Clutch Gaming. I did.
Yep. And if you're going to the games, they have they're giving away a lot of the merch. So grab something for yourself. Have a good memory of Clutch Gaming before they become Team Dignitas. Day 2 brings us with a game that I want to highlight. It starts off with the first game, Optics against Golden Guardians. We see Golden Guardians beating a team that we all thought were kind of a playoff team, maybe a middling of a team, but Optics being a solid team. Now they are 8 and 8, tied with Golden Guardians.
Yes. The Golden Guardians is really the team that threw off my predictions about what was going to happen. Because I was not expecting them to win either one of their games this weekend, and winning both really put the title picture in a totally different light than I was looking at it before. Optic really kind of put themselves in a tough spot because they play Cloud9 and CLG this upcoming weekend. Like it is not a far cry to think that Optic could go 0-2 again.
Mm-hmm.
And end up going from 8 and 6 to 8 and 10. The only upside I would say is, like I was talking about before, when you have a team like Optic that really needs this win and they're playing against two teams that are locked into the playoffs, it's very possible that CLG or Cloud9 might sort of quote unquote take a game off here and lose to Optic. But on paper, Optic is likely to end up at 8 and 10.
And that's quite sad because I had high hopes for them. The Optics is one of the teams that I could never bog down, like pin down what they're gonna do. Of course, we know that typically they don't really score well in DFS for DFS purposes, and mostly that's on Dogla. But they came in, Crown looking very good. Arrow was playing better than he did in the past, and Meteos was one that really did surprise me in the beginning of this split. And now we're showing maybe it's a regression to what they are. Is this a playoff team, John?
Well, I think they are a playoff team. I'm just not 100% sure they're going to make it. I think quality-wise they are. I'm just not 100% sure how the tiebreakers are going to play out. I mean, I think you have to assume that they're going to go 8 and 10. I think it's tough not to assume they're going to go 8 and 10.
Yeah. Definitely, I don't see C9 taking a game off because they're still wanting that, if they can possibly help themselves get to the bye week. And as well as Counter Logic wanting to locking themselves into that number 2 slot. And let's see, TL losing to C9 was one where it gives me a little bit of a glimpse of why I was higher on C9 in the beginning of this split. Was this TL trying things out, or was this more C9 just really putting them all in this game?
I think this one is a really good example of Team Liquid just not wanting to show off strategies. Like, I think Team Liquid is really trying to establish the Sona 80 carry as a problem for people, but it's not actually what they want to do. I think they want to establish it as a problem so that other teams feel like they have to ban out the Sona. Or they have to ban out the Tom Kench. But I don't think it's actually what Team Liquid wants to do. I think they're trying to set other teams up to force bans. And so they're saying to themselves going into a matchup like this, well, we can play the Sona. It doesn't show off any strategies. And if we win, it's just another reason why they need to ban Sona against us. So I really think that's what this was from Team Liquid. I definitely think Team Liquid is the best team in the region by a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if they win one more game, they just lock themselves first place. There's no way for the others to catch up. Okay, so with that said, let's preview. Day 1. Which are the games that you have already circled in your mind that this is an interesting game to look at? Both
This
DFS,
is
yeah.
this is really similar to Europe, unfortunately, which is I don't know how you get away from playing Team Liquid here. It's Team Liquid against Echo Fox, the worst team in the league.
Worst.
Echo Fox also tends to give up a lot of fantasy points, and these are two teams that are locked in their positions. Like Team Liquid can't miss playoffs, and Echo Fox can't make playoffs. And I was just talking about when those two types of teams match up, you can expect bloodier than normal games. So here you have like basically the surest thing on the slate, and it's likely to be one of the bloodiest games. Yeah, I have a pretty hard time passing up Team Liquid against Echo Fox for sure.
Yeah. And that's why Team Liquid is priced as the most expensive of the slate. No surprise there, except Jensen again.
Yep, as they should be.
Mhm.
Second match of the day, TSM and FlyQuest. This one's a hard avoid for me. FlyQuest is the least bloody team in the league.
Yep.
TSM is going to want to win, and TSM does this thing. Team Liquid does it sometimes too, but when they really need to win, they tend to play slower, more methodical games where they try to out macro people. I would expect this game to not be bloody at all and end up with a TSM win. So it doesn't make FlyQuest valuable as an underdog, and TSM I don't think is likely to score well. So that one's going to be a skipper for me.
We are on the same page on that, and everything in between will be where you kind of tease out which games can be good for DFS purposes. And I'm looking at the C9 Golden Guardians and the Clutch and 100 Thieves game. Putting a pause.
C9
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm putting a pause on CLG Optics. I haven't figured that one out. I know CLG can win, but they don't typically need to show off in their wins. So
That feels like one of those games that has potential to score some points, but is just overshadowed by some of these other games. If Optic wins, I wouldn't expect them to score that well, and CLG should win, but I don't think CLG would be likely to score as well as Team Liquid or my other favorite of the week that you mentioned, Cloud9 and Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians is one of the highest DPL teams in the league, one of the teams that dies the most when they lose, and Cloud9 is the highest KPW team in the league when they win. So I think your threat here, like I think C9 makes a fantastic play.
yeah.
The threat that you have here is that Golden Guardians needs to win. Cloud9 would like to win, but it's not necessarily like a requirement for them. It makes it hard to play either one of these teams to some degree. Like Golden Guardians, I don't think they're going to win, which makes them hard to play unless you're just going for like a flyer ownership play. Cloud9 is less likely to win than Team Liquid, playing a tougher opponent than Team Liquid, but they probably have better upside scoring-wise.
Yeah, I agree with that. What I've been trying to experiment this whole year, was playing like you played every opponent against G2. I tried to do that with C9. It worked out in a spring split. For some reason, even when C9 wins, they give up some of the kills. Has not happened in the summer, so that's where I lose a lot of my that process in there.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, but Golden Guardians has been one of the teams that, win or lose, they have been scoring well. Some games missing here and there, but it seems like they're consistent in their wins and losses in terms of kills.
It's a scary game, but it is a game that I do think you should definitely have some exposure to. Like, I think I like both sides of this game to have some exposure. Golden Guardians is going to be a really good percentage play. I don't think there will be a lot of people on them, and they need this win, so they're going to be playing the best they can. Cloud9 is completely capable of drafting a worthless composition and getting destroyed. Like, that happens sometimes for Cloud9. So that's another game I would definitely be targeting. 100 Thieves and Clutch, the last game of the day. A little weird because Clutch was by far the bloodiest team in spring, to the best of my memory.
Yes.
But are not at all this split.
No.
They're much more conservative this split. So I think they make a decent underdog play if you don't think any of the other underdogs are going to win. Clutch could be a decent underdog play. But I don't expect that game to be very bloody. So I'll probably try to avoid 100 Thieves Clutch gaming if I can.
This game has for itself a playoff implications like we previously mentioned. So there are times when both teams are trying to avoid making mistakes and just slows down the game that much more. But you're right. Clutch has not been as bloody. I think Huni has been playing well. That's a correlation there. He's not been inting or trying to make, Jisuke type of plays. uh, and I think Cody's son was a good addition for Clutch Gaming, into not allowing themselves to be one way or another, dying too much or killing too much. So that's a great point there. Thank you for breaking down both days. Now, for as a bonus to you guys, because we don't have the salary, but it's one of
We
the
do
bigger
have the
tournaments.
salary now.
Oh, we do have the salary for day 2.
It just came up just recently.
Wow.
So we've got it.
Wow.
I'm looking at it now.
Dude, that is exciting. Oh, wow. They're not even waiting for the results. We have, let's see, the schedule here. We have Optics against C9. Like we already mentioned, Optics is probably in a either will they know if they lose day 1, or they eliminated, or is the chances like
I don't
super
think
slim?
they will. I think they will need to win this game no matter what happens on Saturday. So I think Optic makes a very good underdog play on Sunday, especially if Cloud9 can't get second anymore. I'd have to look again to see what possible results could lead to that. But if Cloud9 can't get second anymore, so they have no reason to play whatsoever, this will be the Super Bowl for Optic.
My thinking is if CLG wins day 1, then they lock Cloud9 out because they do hold the tiebreaker, if I'm not mistaken. They might be 1-1, or they might.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So there's a scenario where Cloud9 is locked out of second, and if that happens, yeah, this is the Super Bowl for Optic. So they need to win this badly. So I think they make a pretty good underdog play on that Sunday slate.
Wonderful. And I'm gonna probably, as of now, think I'm just not gonna have any interest in the CLG 100 game.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I don't think I'll be involved in that.
And then TSM against Team Liquid. This might be where TSM already find out. Well, they're gonna make playoffs, like you mentioned, but like last place. So there might not be anything to play for either team.
This one kind of depends because this is a real rivalry here, TSM and Team Liquid. And I can't tell if these are the kind of teams that are able to put their pride aside and have some fun. Like they might really just want to give each other the business and play serious league and try to get a win because they don't like each other. But normally this would be a spot where I would just say Clown Fiesta, man.
Yeah.
2 teams locked into the playoffs, rivalry, the kinds of players that love to troll like Bjergsen and Double Lift, Sven. This very possible Clown Fiesta here. I'll definitely have some exposure to the Team Liquid TSM game.
That's an
on
angle.
Both sides because Clown Fiestas are 50-50, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good angle, and having the history on that side, I probably didn't even check that angle. Thanks for bringing that up. And then Golden Guardians against Clutch Gaming. This could potentially be a Fiesta game.
It could. Well, no, this game should be a win and in for playoffs.
Win and in. All right.
This game should be a win and in almost for sure, at least for one of these 2 teams, if not both. So I would expect this game to be taken really seriously by both teams. We'd have to see what happens day 1, but I think both teams should be caring about this matchup, which would trend me away from playing that game. Like you said, teams tend to play less aggressively when there's a lot on the line. So I would be maybe trending away from Clutch versus Golden Guardians.
Interesting. For me, it's probably comes down to salary and figuring out who wins, and they're priced right next to each other as the Fave and Dog. And the last game of the excuse me, Fox against FlyQuest. Is this a spot where you just go like?
This is the Fiesta alert right here. Fiesta alert is beeping. FlyQuest and Fox are playing for nothing. They don't care. This is likely the last time these lineups are going to play together. I would put the Fiesta percentage for this game at least 50% chance that this game goes Fiesta.
Yeah.
This is normally a matchup I never want to play FlyQuest because they're so low kill. But they also have Wild Turtle. For people that don't know about Wild Turtle, he's very famous for in solo queue. He plays all the positions, and he's one of the guys that'll bust out like a jungle Yasuo and just go ham, just go 0-10 or 10-0. He's the perfect guy to have on your team to have a Fiesta. So I would definitely have exposure to Fly versus Fox. Definite chance that game goes off the rails and ends 26-21.
Awesome. This is great because you get 2 chances to play this game. Get the main slate and the late slate.
Yep. I would definitely have some exposure to this game for sure.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for just joining me. It's fun. We're talking DFS. We're just hitting everything. Uh, why don't you just talk a little bit about what you're looking forward to as far as worlds go? And I'll be right back.
At Worlds, my I currently would have G2 as the front runner to win Worlds. I just don't see a team in any region outside of maybe IG that has their talent plus their play style. Like they have a play style that just gets you some wins. Like even if they were playing teams that were better than them, their style is such, it's so aggressive and so dynamic that you're just going to get some wins sometimes even if you don't deserve them. But they're still the best teams in the world. So when you have a strategy that can steal teams from anybody and you're already the better team, it's just tough to lose. From the other regions, Invictus, definitely a shot to win. I don't think they're at the level they were last year, but they should definitely be a top 3 team. Royal kind of threw away the spring split, but I would expect Royal to be contending going into Worlds. From Korea, honestly, I know me and Gelati will come to blows over this at some point, but I just don't see a Korean team winning this Worlds. I think SKT is going to be a contender. I think if they could get there, a team like Damwon Gaming could be a contender. Griffin could be a contender. But I really do not see an LCK team winning Worlds. If I was going to pick 3 teams and say one of them is going to win Worlds, I would pick G2, Royal, and Invictus.
Wow, LPL ruling again, huh?
Yeah, I think G2 is the favorite. But if G2 doesn't win, I think the kind of team that beats them is an IG or a Royal, not an SKT or a Griffin.
And I think that there we have seen very few legitimate game that G2 lost, and that is why they are the favorite. And I think you got on the G2 train really, really early, like even
Yeah,
before we
it
saw
was
anything.
it was really funny, my G2 story, just briefly, because
Hmm.
before spring, I said G2 is not going to be good in spring. It's going to take too long for the role swap to happen. And after week 1, it's like, nope, they're going to be awesome. Like I take it back, they're going to be awesome. Like I only had to see 2 games to go like, nope, I was way wrong. They are going to be very good. So yeah,
Yeah,
G2. Luckily, I switched over quickly on them.
and that's just in time too, because you didn't need additional evidence. Perks has been transitioning well, and I think the current patch, the current meta, has been very beneficial for G2 as well. With all the role differences, you can play different players. You can play mages,
That's the beauty of
bots. You can,
G2
yeah,
though. That's what makes them so good is I don't even think it matters. Like you
right.
can put any meta you want out there and G2 plays so many champions and so many combinations of
Mhm.
champions that no matter what meta you pick, they can switch lanes, they can play all different kinds of styles, they can go to a funnel if they want. They do so many different things well. That's what makes them so good.
Hmm.
There's teams with more talented players than G2, but nobody adapts both in the draft and in the games the way that they do and it's just unbelievable to watch.
This is definitely a marriage of individual talent and team chemistry and just
Yeah, perfect storm.
things coming together. We had hopes of that with Griffin. We had hopes of that, of seeing that again with IG. But right now, clearly, G2 is the one that's showing continued and consistent success with their composition, with their talents, and they should be the favorite. And for me personally, I would want to see them repeat. But
I
well,
would love to see them win Worlds. I would love it.
first, yeah, for them to win worlds and then repeat. But we'll have to see. It's exciting things happening, guys. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for holding the fort while I was taking care of some things. What are you working on, and where can people find you?
So I don't do as much content creation as I used to. Pretty much the only content you can find is the Gold Card podcast, and then when I do my guest appearances, and occasionally I'll just tweet out a bunch of stats when I think they're interesting. But you can definitely find me on Twitter at the esports plug. That's where the majority of my stuff's going. At some point, I expect to start doing content again, and my Twitter is much more interesting for people when I'm doing content. When I'm just betting, it favors me not to give out information because I'm not doing any sort of content, and the information helps me win money betting and DFSing. So I get a little bit bland when I'm not doing content, but that is where I'm at, and I'm kind of interesting. You might have fun.
Oh man, if you want to, know how fun John is, just play him in TFT or in regular
Platinum,
summoner.
baby.
He made platinum. That's right. Faster than you ever done in the Rift.
way,
I'm,
way,
I'm
way
also,
faster.
I've also just reached silver, and I've never reached silver in anything in my life. But so exciting stuff happening. Exciting stuff. Well, my name is Chris Primetime at Primetime. You can hit me up on Twitter as well. We will see you guys this weekend. If I don't make it to the top, I hope that you will. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.